Part 1. Chapter 1, which describes the condition and profession of the famous gentleman Don Quixote of La Mancha. Somewhere in La Mancha, in a place whose name I do not care to remember, a gentleman lived not long ago. He had a lance and an ancient shield on a shelf, and kept a skinny nag and a greyhound for racing. An occasional stew, beef more often than lamb, hash most nights, eggs and abstinence on Saturdays, lentils on Fridays, sometimes squab as a treat on Sundays. These consumed 3/4 of his income. The rest went for a light woolen tunic and velvet breeches and hose of the same material for feast days. Weekdays were honored with dun-colored coarse cloth. He had a housekeeper past 40, a niece not yet 20, and a man of all work who did everything from saddling the horse to pruning the trees. Our gentleman was approximately 50 years old. His complexion was weathered, his flesh scrawny, his face gaunt, and he was a very early riser and a great lover of the hunt. Some claim that his family name was Quixote or Quexote, for there is a certain amount of disagreement among the authors who write of this matter. Reliable conjecture seems to indicate that his name was Quexana, but this does not matter very much to our story. In its telling there is absolutely no deviation from the truth. And so, let it be said that this aforementioned gentleman spent his times of leisure, which meant most of the year, reading books of chivalry with so much devotion and enthusiasm that he forgot almost completely about the hunt, and even about the administration of his estate. In his rash curiosity and folly, he went so far as to sell acres of arable land in order to buy books of chivalry to read. He brought as many of them as he could into his house. He thought none was as fine as those composed by the worthy Feliciano de Silva. The clarity of his prose and complexity of his language seemed to him more valuable than pearls, particularly when he read the declarations and missives of love. In these, he often found written, "The reason for the unreason to which my reason turns so weakens, my reason, that with reason I complain of thy beauty." And also when he read, "The heavens on high divinely heighten thy divinity with the stars, and make thee deserving of the deserts thy greatness deserves." With these words and phrases, the poor gentleman lost his mind. He spent sleepless nights trying to understand them and extract their meaning. Aristotle himself, if he came back to life for only that purpose, would not have been able to decipher or understand. Our gentleman was not very happy with the wounds that Don Belianis gave and received. He imagined that no matter how great the physicians and surgeons who cured him, he would still have his face and entire body covered with scars and marks. But even so, he praised the author for having concluded his book with the promise of unending adventure. He often felt the desire to take up his pen and give it the conclusion promised there. No doubt he would have done so and even published it, if other greater and more persistent thoughts had not prevented him from doing so. He often had discussions with the village priest, who was a learned man, a graduate of Siguenza, regarding who had been the greater knight, Palmerin of England or Amadis of Gaul. Master Nicholas, the village barber, said that none was the equal of the knight of Phoebus. If any could be compared to him, it was Don Galaor, the brother of Amadis of Gaul, because he was moderate in everything. He was a knight who was not affected, not as weepy as his brother, and incomparable in questions of courage. In short, our gentleman became so caught up in reading that he spent his nights reading from dusk till dawn, and his days reading from sunrise to sunset. With too little sleep and too much reading, his brains dried up, causing him to lose his mind. His fantasy filled with everything he had read in his books: enchantments, battles, challenges, wounds, courtings, loves, torments, and other impossible foolishness. He became so convinced in his imagination of the truth of all the countless grandiloquent and false inventions he read, that for him no history in the world was truer. He would say that El Cid Ruy Diaz had been a very good knight, but could not compare to Amadis, the knight of the blazing sword, who with a single backstroke cut 2 ferocious and colossal giants in half. He was fonder of Bernardo del Carpio, because at Roncesvalles he had killed the enchanted Roland by availing himself of the tactic of Hercules, when he crushed Antaeus, the son of Earth, in his arms. He spoke highly of the giant Morgante because, although he belonged to the race of giants, all of them haughty and lacking in courtesy, he alone was amiable and well-behaved. But, more than any of the others, he admired Reynaldos de Montalban, above all when he saw him emerge from his castle and rob anyone he met. He also admired him when he crossed the sea and stole the idol of Mohammed made all of gold, as recounted in his history. He would have traded his housekeeper, and even his niece, for the chance to strike a blow at the traitor Ganelanon. The truth is that when his mind was completely gone, he had the strangest thought any lunatic in the world ever had. It seemed reasonable and necessary to him, both for the sake of his honor and as a service to the nation, to become a knight-errant. He wanted to travel the world with his armor and his horse to seek adventures and engage in everything he had read that knights-errant engaged in. He wished to right all manner of wrongs, and by seizing the opportunity and placing himself in danger, end those wrongs, winning eternal renown and everlasting fame. The poor man imagined himself already wearing the crown, won by the valor of his arm, of the empire of Trebizond at the very least. And so it was that with these exceedingly agreeable thoughts, and carried away by the extraordinary pleasure he took in them, he hastened to put into effect what he so fervently desired. The first thing he did was to attempt to clean some armor that had belonged to his great-grandfathers. It had been stained with rust and covered with mildew, and had spent many long years stored and forgotten in a corner. He did the best he could to clean and repair it, but he saw that it had a great defect. Instead of a full sallet helmet with an attached neckguard, there was only a simple headpiece. He compensated for this with his industry, and out of pasteboard he fashioned a kind of half-helmet that, when attached to the headpiece, took on the appearance of a full sallet. It is true that in order to test if it was strong and could withstand a blow, he took out his sword and struck it twice. With the first blow, he undid in a moment what it had taken him a week to create. He could not help being disappointed at the ease with which he had hacked it to pieces. To protect against that danger he made another one, placing strips of iron on the inside so that he was satisfied with its strength. Not wanting to put it to the test again, he designated and accepted it as an extremely fine sallet. Then he went to look at his nag, and though its hooves had more cracks than his master's pate, and it showed more flaws than Ganela's horse, that tantum pellis et ossa fuit, it seemed to him that Alexander's Bucephalus and El Cid's Babica were not its equal. He spent 4 days thinking about the name he would give it. As he told himself, it was not seemly that the horse of so famous a knight, and a steed so intrinsically excellent, should not have a worthy name. He was looking for the precise name that would declare what the horse had been before its master became a knight-errant, and what it was now. He was determined that if the master was changing his condition, the horse too would change its name to one that would win the fame and recognition its new position and profession deserved. After many names that he shaped and discarded, subtracted from and added to, unmade and remade in his memory and imagination, he finally decided to call the horse Rocinante. It was a name, in his opinion, that was noble, sonorous, and reflective of what it had been when it was a nag. Now, it was the foremost nag in all the world. Having given a name, and one so much to his liking to his horse, he wanted to give one to himself. He spent another 8 days pondering this. At last he called himself Don Quixote, which is why, as has been noted, the authors of this absolutely true history determined that he undoubtedly must have been named Quixada, and not Quixada, as others have claimed. In any event, recalling that the valiant Amadis had not been content with simply calling himself Amadis, but had added the name of his kingdom and realm in order to bring it fame, he too, like a good knight, wanted to add the name of his birthplace to his own. He called himself Don Quixote of La Mancha, thereby, to his mind, clearly stating his lineage and country and honoring it by making it part of his title. Having cleaned his armor and made a full helmet out of a simple headpiece, and having given a name to his horse and decided on one for himself, he realized that the only thing left for him to do was to find a lady to love. For the knight-errant without a lady love was a tree without leaves or fruit, a body without a soul. He said to himself, "If I, because of my evil sins, or my good fortune, meet with a giant somewhere, as ordinarily befalls knights-errant, and I unseat him with a single blow, or cut his body in half, or, in short, conquer and defeat him, would it not be good to have someone to whom I could send him, so that he might enter and fall to his knees before my sweet lady? He could say in the humble voice of surrender, 'I, lady, am the giant Caraculiambro, lord of the island Melindrania, defeated in single combat by the never sufficiently praised Knight Don Quixote of La Mancha, who commanded me to appear before your ladyship, so that your highness might dispose of me as you chose.' Guess. Oh, how pleased our good knight was when he had made this speech, and even more pleased when he discovered the one he could call his lady. It is believed that in a nearby village there was a very attractive peasant girl with whom he had once been in love, although she apparently never knew or noticed. Her name was Aldonza Lorenzo, and he thought it a good idea to call her the lady of his thoughts. Searching for a name that would not differ significantly from his, and would suggest and imply that of a princess and great lady, he decided to call her Dulcinea of Toboso. She came from Toboso, a name, to his mind, that was musical and beautiful, and filled with significance, as were all the others he had given to himself, and everything pertaining to him.